A man walks into a room, speaks confidently, takes control of the conversation, and people call him powerful. A woman walks into the same room, speaks the exact same way, and suddenly she's too much, too ambitious, too intimidating, too hard to handle. And that right there is the problem with most power advice. The 48 Laws of Power was written in 1998 by Robert Greene, a book built on the psychology of kings, generals, politicians, war strategists, and powerful men navigating systems created by other powerful men. But for decades, women have been reading those same laws, trying to apply them in a completely different social reality. Because women are not punished and rewarded the same way men are. A man who says less is mysterious. A woman who says less is rude. A man who protects his image is strategic. A woman who protects her image is fake. A man who pulls away becomes desirable. A woman who pulls away becomes emotionally unavailable. Same behavior, completely different consequences. And psychology actually supports this. Studies repeatedly show that dominant behavior increases perceived competence in men, while the same behavior in women often decreases likability. Think about how early this conditioning starts. Little girls are praised for being sweet, easy, helpful, quiet. Boys are often rewarded for being bold, assertive, opinionated. So by the time many women become adults, they don't just fear failure. They fear being disliked. And that fear changes everything. It changes how you speak, how you text, how you walk into rooms, how much you apologize, how much you explain yourself, how small you make your own intelligence so other people feel comfortable around it. The truth is, many women were never taught power. They were taught approval. So today, we're rewriting the laws, not from the perspective of kings and war generals, but from the perspective of women navigating modern social power, relationships, reputation, emotional intelligence, femininity, ambition, and survival. Because real power for women does not look exactly the way history taught men to wield it. And once you understand that, you start moving completely differently. The biggest problem with most power advice for women is that it was never actually written for women in the first place. The 48 Laws of Power is built on stories of kings, generals, politicians, and men navigating systems where male authority was already expected. But women live in a different social reality. The same behavior that makes a man look powerful can make a woman get judged, misunderstood, or socially punished. And psychology actually supports this. Researchers have found something called the likability penalty, where assertive behavior often increases perceived competence in men while decreasing likability in women. Basically, confidence in men is usually read as leadership. Confidence in women gets emotionally analyzed. Is she arrogant? Too intense? Too aggressive? Nice enough? Women are expected to perform this impossible balance of being confident, but not intimidating, ambitious, but still emotionally comforting, attractive, but not attention-seeking. It's exhausting. And honestly, you can see this everywhere in normal life. A woman sends a text and rereads it 14 times wondering if she sounded annoying. Meanwhile, some guy sends K and peacefully continues his day. A woman says no once and suddenly feels guilty for 6 hours. A woman sets one boundary and immediately wonders if she was too harsh. So many women are walking around mentally exhausted because they're constantly emotionally editing themselves in real time. Did I sound rude? Was that too much? Should I explain more? It's tiring. And this conditioning starts early. Girls are usually rewarded for being agreeable, polite, nurturing, emotionally aware. Which means many women unconsciously learn that being liked equals safety. Approval becomes emotional security. So later in life, becoming more direct or self-assured can feel uncomfortable internally because they were trained to associate self-protection with selfishness. And one of the biggest mistakes women make after reading power books is thinking power means becoming emotionally cold. Suddenly, they try to become detached masterminds who trust nobody and care about nothing. But real power usually looks much calmer than that. Emotionally regulated people are often perceived as more trustworthy and competent because calm nervous systems naturally affect the people around them. That's why some people walk into a room and instantly make it feel grounded. Real power is not constantly proving yourself. It's self-possession. It's being able to stay centered without needing validation every 5 seconds. And another thing people underestimate is how much humans study energy more than words. Someone can say, "I'm confident," all day long, but if they constantly overexplain, chase approval, tolerate disrespect, and abandon their own boundaries, people subconsciously feel that inconsistency. Confidence is communicated through tone, timing, emotional stability, and how comfortable someone is with silence. In fact, social psychology studies show people often confuse confidence for confidence, especially in leadership settings. That's why powerful women are not always the loudest women. Usually, they're the women who stopped shrinking automatically. The women who learned how to communicate clearly without over-explaining. The women who understand social dynamics without becoming controlled by them. Because true power for women is not copying male behavior exactly. It's understanding psychology, perception, emotional intelligence, communication, and boundaries, and then using those things strategically instead of fearfully. The first law women need to understand is, never outshine the master. And honestly, when a lot of women hear this law, it sounds depressing, like another reminder to become smaller. But that's not the real meaning. The real lesson is understanding ego and timing. Because humans do not react well to feeling threatened, especially people already in positions of authority. And honestly, most people care more about protecting their ego than protecting truth. You can see this everywhere. A new employee joins a workplace and immediately starts correcting everyone aggressively, trying to prove how smart they are. Even if they're talented, people emotionally resist them because nobody likes feeling exposed or replaced. But women experience this differently because many women already learn to minimize themselves from childhood. They downplay achievements automatically. Somebody compliments them, and they immediately say, "Oh, it was nothing." Meanwhile, some random guy confidently explains a topic he learned yesterday and somehow leaves believing he should start a podcast. So the goal is not hiding yourself. The goal is controlled visibility. Powerful women understand timing. They know when to observe, when to let people underestimate them, and when to fully own the room. There's a huge difference between shrinking out of fear and strategically choosing when to display your strengths. And honestly, the most powerful people are rarely the people desperately trying to prove they're powerful. Confidence feels strongest when it's calm. Another law that completely changes how women move through the world is always say less than necessary. Because women are socially conditioned to explain themselves constantly. A woman says no and suddenly feels like she owes everybody an emotional essay afterward. "I'm so sorry, I've just been overwhelmed lately." Meanwhile, someone else just says, "Can't make it," and peacefully moves on with life. And the reason silence feels uncomfortable is because silence creates uncertainty. Psychologically, people who tolerate silence often appear more emotionally secure because they don't rush to manage everyone else's feelings instantly. Over-explaining usually comes from fear. Fear of rejection, misunderstanding, conflict, or disappointing people. But ironically, too much explaining weakens your message because it signals uncertainty. You can even see this in texting. One person sends 5 paragraphs emotionally justifying themselves while the calmer person sends 2 sentences and somehow feels more grounded. That's because certainty feels emotionally stabilizing to other people. And honestly, a lot of women don't realize how much energy they waste emotionally editing themselves all day long. Should I explain more? Do they hate me now? Was that rude? It's exhausting. The goal is not becoming cold. It's learning that not every boundary requires a TED Talk afterward. Then there's reputation. Humans form impressions terrifyingly fast. Psychologists call this thin slicing, where people make judgments within seconds based on tone, appearance, confidence, and behavior. And for women especially, reputation spreads socially very quickly. One emotionally reactive moment, one rumor, one embarrassing situation, people remember it for years. And honestly, this is why oversharing can become dangerous. Not everybody listening to you supports you. Some people collect information emotionally. Some people bond through gossip. Some people smile in your face and later weaponize your vulnerability when they feel insecure or competitive. That doesn't mean become paranoid. It means become discerning. A lot of women think authenticity means telling everybody everything. It doesn't. Real maturity is understanding that not everyone deserves access to your private world. Your emotional life should not become public entertainment for people who haven't earned trust. And honestly, humans are naturally curious about what feels emotionally contained. Mystery creates respect far more than oversharing does. Another powerful law is using absence to increase value. And honestly, once you notice this law in real life, you can't unsee it. Humans naturally appreciate what feels scarce. There's actual psychological research showing scarcity increases perceived value. Luxury brands use it. Social media algorithms use it. Human relationships work similarly. And many women are taught that love means constant availability, always replying immediately, always emotionally present, always accessible. But people unconsciously normalize what is constantly available. The friend who is always there becomes expected instead of appreciated. The woman who constantly rearranges her life for everyone else slowly teaches people that her own time matters less. This doesn't mean playing manipulative games or pretending not to care. That energy becomes obvious very fast. It means having a genuinely full life. Hobbies, goals, friendships, interests, independence. A life that does not emotionally collapse because somebody stopped texting for 3 hours. And weirdly enough, that's what often creates attraction and respect. Genuine self-sufficiency. Then there's one of the most important laws for women. Recreate yourself. A lot of women stay loyal to identities they built for survival. The people pleaser. The quiet girl. The perfect daughter. The low-maintenance girlfriend. The woman who never asks for help. And after years of performing those identities, they start feeling trapped inside them. But neuroscience actually shows the brain remains adaptable throughout life. Identity is not fixed. Humans constantly reshape themselves through repeated behavior and environment. Reinvention is psychologically real. And honestly, growth feels uncomfortable partly because people around you become attached to predictable versions of you. The moment you change, some people react strangely. Suddenly you're different, too confident, too distant. But usually what they actually mean is, you stopped behaving in ways that benefited their comfort. Reinvention is not fake. It's intentional evolution. Then there's the mirror effect, one of the most powerful social skills women can develop. Emotionally reactive women are often dismissed quickly, while emotionally controlled women become very difficult to manipulate. Think about manipulative behavior casually. Passive-aggressive comments. Gaslighting. Someone subtly disrespecting you. Someone constantly taking credit for your work. Most people either explode emotionally or stay silent completely. But the mirror effect is different. Instead of reacting emotionally, you calmly reflect the behavior back. Oh, interesting, you interrupted me 3 times while I was speaking. Or, so you're upset about something you also did yesterday? Calm observation makes people deeply uncomfortable because it forces awareness without giving them emotional chaos to feed on. Manipulative people often rely on emotional reactions because once you become reactive, attention shifts from their behavior to your reaction. And honestly, calmness is powerful partly because it's rare. Most people are emotionally impulsive. One annoying comment and suddenly the whole mood changes. But emotionally regulated people create psychological stability around them. Even neuroscience shows calm nervous systems influence other nervous systems socially. Real power is not loudness. A lot of the time it's composure. But honestly, there are also laws women needed that traditional power books barely discussed at all. The first is selective vulnerability. A lot of women grow up thinking vulnerability means telling people everything, every fear, every insecurity, every emotion. But vulnerability without discernment becomes self-exposure instead of connection. And honestly, not everybody knows how to hold vulnerability with care. Some people use it for gossip. Some use it during arguments later. Some people become emotionally close to you only because you constantly emotionally pour into them. Psychologists talk about emotional boundaries, understanding where you end and another person begins emotionally. And many women struggle with this because they were taught to emotionally merge with others, to absorb everybody's feelings, to fix everybody's problems. But powerful vulnerability is intentional. It's chosen carefully. The strongest people are not people who never feel deeply. They're people who know who deserves access to those depths. Then there's emotional intelligence itself. Traditional power books often treat emotion like weakness, something to suppress. But emotional intelligence is one of the most powerful skills a woman can develop because humans are emotional creatures pretending to be logical most of the time. The person who understands energy in a room often has more influence than the person with the loudest voice. Someone who can sense insecurity, jealousy, attraction, manipulation, tension, ego, that person understands social dynamics on a completely different level. And neuroscience supports this too. Human communication is heavily nonverbal. Tone, pauses, facial expressions, timing, emotional regulation, all of it shapes perception. That's why sometimes someone says completely normal words, but the energy still feels off. And honestly, emotionally intelligent women often underestimate their own power because emotional intelligence looks soft. But understanding people deeply is strategic. It helps you recognize manipulation faster. Choose healthier relationships, better environments, better opportunities. Because once you understand people emotionally, you stop taking everything personally. And then there's community. One thing that always felt strange about traditional power advice is how isolated it sounds. Trust nobody. Use everyone strategically. Stay emotionally detached. Honestly, living like that sounds exhausting. Historically, women survived through community, through friendships, support systems, emotional networks. And psychologically, humans are healthier when they feel connected to people they trust. Studies literally show strong social support improves stress regulation, confidence, mental health, and even physical health. And honestly, social media made comparisons so much worse. Everyone comparing beauty, lifestyles, relationships, success. Some women unconsciously start viewing every other woman as competition. But comparison destroys peace very quickly. Some of the most successful women in the world got opportunities because another woman recommended them, protected them, opened doors for them, supported them behind the scenes. And honestly, one secure female friendship can heal parts of you that constant validation never will. Real power grows faster in healthy environments, not lonely ones. And finally, the most important law of all, define power for yourself. And honestly, one of the biggest signs of maturity is realizing you do not need to become harder to become stronger. Real power can look calm, grounded, emotionally stable, disciplined, peaceful, self-respecting. The strongest woman in the room is not always the loudest one or the coldest one. A lot of the time, it's simply the woman who knows herself deeply enough that she no longer changes personalities every time she enters a different room. And people start feeling your presence differently because it's finally real. Because the goal is not becoming feared. The goal is becoming solid enough within yourself that you stop unconsciously giving your power away. And honestly, I think that's a much more interesting kind of power anyway. And now I genuinely want to know, which law do you think women struggle with the most right now? Over-explaining? Boundaries? Validation? People-pleasing? Because honestly, the comments on this topic are probably about to become a free therapy session. That's all for today. We'll see you in next one. Bye.